Michelle Marie McGrath.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Unclassified Woman. Today I'm happy to be speaking to Yamini Toohey, who's based in Sydney, Australia. Yamini is an astrologer, educator, entrepreneur, and the founder of Globalwoman. One of her favourite things in life is seeing women get energised about stepping into their power, finding a life that's theirs, and living revolutionary lives. Sounds very exciting, doesn't it? She believes that this time of personal, cultural, and planetary change is the time to bring forth new ways of living, relating, and economy. Yamini started Globalwoman because she wholeheartedly believes that the revolution will be feminist, connected, and global. Every day she goes to bat for her Globalwoman sisterhood, helping them to call on their intuition and hustle, slashing through obstacles fiercely, boldly, powerfully. Yamini's soul work with Globalwoman champions women to explore, evolve, and embody boldness, fierceness, creativity, relating, power, and ambition, which are universal themes in every woman's life. And I love the sound of that. It all sounds so strong and powerful, doesn't it? And I can highly recommend Yamini's work. I have had a couple of sessions with her working with the goddess asteroids and exploring those in my astrology chart, and it really puts quite a different spin on those energies that are often not very much focused on when you have a traditional astrology session. So anyway, I hope you enjoy this conversation. So welcome, Yamini. Thrilled to have you here today. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm very excited.
And so really looking forward to hearing all about your experience with regards to this very rich topic, as you know. And I just love this because there's just so many variables with every woman's story, of course. And so would you mind, just to give us some context, sharing a little bit about your background and whether you've not had a child due to personal choice or whether it's been circumstantial?
Sure. Well, I'm just to give you some background. I'm one of 8 children, so came from an Irish Catholic family, but raised in Australia. And my mother she's still alive, but was an incredibly creative woman, and still is, but incredibly creative, brilliant at everything she did. And anyway, her and my father fell in love and got married and started having children, and then they had 8.
Gosh.
And what happened? Yeah, really. I just saw what it did. And my mother was a very good mother. I'm not taking anything away from that, but for her to raise children, she had to give up a lot of herself. And I saw what she gave up. And I was, probably the introvert in the family, the sensitive child. I really internalized very young, at a young age, that this was hard work. And not only was it hard work, it was work that was all time consuming. I remember being about 15 when I was just coming into that, the hormonal age, starting to menstruate. And
lovely time, isn't it?
Yeah, that whole journey. And I remember sort of looking into the future and getting really, really depressed. And depressed primarily because I thought a woman's path or lot in life, which is a term that my mother liked to use, a woman's lot was to get married and have children. And I just thought, there is no way on earth I am going to do that. Yeah. But I didn't know I would have the agency to make that choice. But I just remember, going into this depression for about 2 years and, eventually emerging and realizing I could do it. But I could have lived the life that I wanted to live and not had children, but it would likely upset some people.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the background essentially.
And so did you feel any pressure from your mum at all, or your siblings or your friends and family? Did you feel any pressure to conform to that?
Never from my mother, because I think my mother realized that out of the 8 children, and she had 3 daughters, that I wasn't going to have children. I think she knew that. But definitely from other people, that family, the expectation from the larger family, when are you going to get married? Your time's running out, blah, blah, blah. And,
Yeah.
I could have been in my 20s, 21 or something, and people were telling my time was running out.
Yeah, ridiculous. Isn't it?
It was and I didn't even know who I was, never mind about birthing a child.
I know.
And I really didn't know anything about, I knew about sex and all of that, but I had no idea about any of the world, really. So it took me a long time to really understand the world, how it worked, how relationships worked. And, the truth is, at no point in my 20s was I ready to have a child. But people kept telling me my time was running out. And I would just nod and smile politely and just kind of let it go. But I used to think, if you knew me at all, you'd think she's not ready to have a child.
No, you're so right. We're really finding out who we are still in our 20s and 30s and 40s and maybe for the rest of our life, really. It's really fascinating, though, isn't it? This fixation on that. Like, I got married when I was 25, and I remember having endless conversations, like literally within moments of the ink being dry on the marriage certificate about, like, when are you going to start a family? And I remember at that point thinking, oh no, I can't, I certainly don't feel ready for that. And truth be told, I never felt ready for it the entire time. It's really quite astonishing that it's just the way that we're culturally and socially conditioned. It's these questions are treated like small talk. It's not like asking about the weather. And yet it's deeply personal, and yet we're so used to having to deal with this barrage of judgments and questions, aren't we?
Well, yeah, and I think, there's talk about when a woman's pregnant about how her body becomes, a free-for-all for everyone to touch and comment on.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's to the same degree, but I do think a woman's, a woman who hasn't had a child yet she's still fair game to be called out on why haven't you had a child? You've got to have a child by complete strangers. You're right, like by taxi drivers lecturing me about having children, and I think, well, that's kind of ironic because you're the guy, you're not having the child, you're not raising the child, because let's be honest, traditional gender roles are often still in place for definitely birthing a child, but raising a child. So, yeah, and just a lot of people telling me your time's going to run out, and why, a beautiful woman like you, why haven't you been snapped up yet and been impregnated? And it's like, well, I used to think, in the end, I just would have this line, what people used to say, well, how come you haven't had a child? And I used to say, well, it's through planning.
Yeah. It's called contraception.
Yeah, exactly. But also, having a plan. Like, I was never going to have a child. Never, ever, ever.
So have you ever wavered from that at all? Like, have there ever been certain points in your life where you've thought, oh, maybe?
No.
So you've always felt very clear.
Yeah. I also think it a lot is to do with the man one is with. Well, that was true for me. And obviously I chose men who weren't really interested in having children. So that was perfect for me.
Yeah.
But, they weren't, they were interesting characters, but they certainly weren't fatherhood material, nor men who were really interested in a conventional, stable relationship. And that kind of suited me, because then the pressure was never put on me, which is, obviously I made that decision very unconsciously to have relationships like that and with those style of men, like the free spirit, new age. I wouldn't use the word new agey, but men who were really seekers and kind of roaming the world and all of that. I did fall pregnant at a time, and I had a miscarriage,
Yeah.
which actually is the best thing that ever happened because I was in fear of actually having a child. That would have been my last go around of being able to fall pregnant. And for just some peculiar thing, I happened to fall pregnant. And I remember a girlfriend of mine who was desperate to have another child. She said to me, I'll take it. And I was more than happy with that, you know.
Really? About giving the child up for adoption?
Well, giving it to my friend because she was in a stable relationship. It was, they really wanted another child. I mean, obviously things would have had to be worked out, but that to me was a better option because I knew that I didn't have the emotional that bandwidth for raising a child. And that was a really big lesson for me because I thought, you know, I was kind of like carefree and living the life. And I thought, you know, I can't be carefree. I can't muck around with this stuff. You know, I need to get contraception or put some other measures in place rather than having this risk occur again.
Yes. Yeah.
Because you can't play with, especially when you're at a certain age and it happens. Like when I was younger, it was a little bit like, oh, yeah, life's great, you know. But at that age, when I knew it was the last time around going around that journey that I thought I can't muck around.
It's a huge responsibility. It's not something that you would take lightly. And I think this seems to be often a common thread that I notice in many women who are very consciously child-free. They acknowledge that it's a huge responsibility and obviously a lifelong commitment, and it's not something that they would take lightly. And so if they did have a child, you know, they usually say that they would throw themselves into that wholeheartedly and take it extremely seriously. And, you know, knowing that and knowing exactly what's involved, and especially because you've come from a large family and you saw how much your mum gave and how hard she worked, it's not something that you can be flippant about.
Yeah. Well, it's not a romantic fantasy.
No, that's right. Yeah.
It's not a romantic fantasy. And, you know, the truth is both my parents worked very hard in their traditional gender roles. You know, mum was raising the family and dad was working 3 jobs, you know, so they were both great parents. But I saw what it took. And, you know, thankfully they've lived long enough now to really enjoy the fruits of their work in terms of raising family and the hard work they did. But I just think, look, hats off to them. I couldn't have done it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
and do you feel that attitudes towards you and this topic like vary from, say, for example, in your 20s, in your 30s, in your 40s? This is something that I've been kind of reflecting on recently. And it's like you were saying that people are often in your 20s, like asking you then when you're that age and you're thinking, I don't really feel ready for this. When I was around the 40 mark, I was dating somebody who he already had children, but he, in his mind, he obviously was of the opinion, again through conditioning, that I was 40, I didn't have a child. Clearly, I must be secretly desperate for a baby, even though I wasn't saying that I was. And I remember having a number of arguments about this because he couldn't believe that I didn't deep down really want that. And he was paranoid about it because he was clear he didn't want any more children. So we'd have these really interesting discussions about it where I'd say, look, I've been quite ambivalent about it and I'm not convinced that I, you know, need to necessarily have that experience. I feel my life feels full and, you know, he didn't really believe me.
I think there's a lot of men who don't really believe that in women because they believe, you know, that's what women want. Yeah. And I just want to say that, you know, I have a lot of girlfriends who've had children and at different times they've all said to me, I want my life back.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, they look at, and I've never looked at their life and thought, wow, that looks great. I've never had that envy. I'm like, oh yeah, that's what I want. But they've all looked at, you know, my life and gone, I want my life back. And, you know, they not to say they're not good mothers and they don't, you know, everything they have to do, but there's a sense of envy. So, you know, it's interesting because the projection is usually that the motherless woman has the envy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it's interesting to, you know, realize actually a lot of women who are raising children have envy as well, envy of the women who don't have children and the freedom and the agency they have.
Yeah, that's right, isn't it? Again, we don't hear so much about that, do we? Like you say.
I don't think there's a lot of I don't know if women can really openly and honestly in a forum discuss that they want their lives back.
I've seen some things recently where more and more women are coming out and saying that they regret motherhood. But again, this is
Uh,
such a taboo topic because I believe that you could equally say that you do have regrets about that, but it doesn't mean that you don't love your children and that you won't look after them to the best of your ability. I think these mixed feelings can coexist because it's just
yes,
part of being human. Whereas there's still very much a taboo around women being openly able to say, if I could have my time again and go back, I think I would have chosen differently. And I've seen quite a lot of things, but often it's anonymous or it's only single name only because I think they'd be scared to death of the backlash, which is,
yeah,
awful that
yeah,
they can't be that honest because, again, it's this constant fear of external judgment that we're
yeah,
all subjected to in one form or another.
yeah, yeah. And I do want to say that in my relationships, there was one man that I met that I thought, yes, I would have a child with you, but the circumstances weren't right. But that was when he was a great man. I knew he would make the experience wonderful.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I said, the circumstances weren't right. And so, and I never pursued it with anyone else. So I was never looking for relationships thinking I want to have a child. Whereas
Yes.
girls of mine were dating, doing the rounds of dating, kind of looking for the guy who was going to be the father of their child, or
Yeah.
in a way, auditioning for the fathers of their child.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's really it's interesting, isn't it? Everyone's experience so different, but what you've described is, again, that feeling of never really having that desire, that ambivalence, that is, again, it seems to be a very common thing, but often it's not talked about very, very much, that people, not all women do have that innate drive or urge to have that, sort of have that experience. And I know for women who do have that, it's very visceral and it can feel
Yeah,
like a very physical urge and craving almost for, they just long to do that. But it isn't every woman's experience. Everyone's experience is different. There are so many of these myths around, it's natural to
mm,
feel that urge to have a child. It's natural to procreate. Well, it's natural for you if you feel like that. It's also natural for you if you don't feel like that. So, again, there are so many of these myths that then make women who don't have that feeling think, well, is there something wrong with me? Like, why am I not having that biological clock ticking? And why am I not feeling that, I need to have that experience or my life will be incomplete or not worthwhile?
and it's also that projection, like you'd be a great mother.
Yeah,
Oh, that one drives. And now it's not. Years ago, it used to be you'll be a great mother, and now it's you would have been a great mother. And I think you really, I mean,
it's so
I
inappropriate, isn't it?
so inappropriate. I think. Well, I feel like I'm being put in a box
Yeah,
because what is a great mother anyway?
exactly. It's so
It's
subjective.
and it's very loaded. And the truth is I'm actually quite maternal. I love nurturing and I love
Yeah.
children and I love babies. I just adore babies and they adore me and little children adore me, but it was never my thing. And I think when people see me with children, that's when it comes up, oh, you would have been a great mother. And I think, well, it's very different, like Googling over a child to being a great mother, to having what it takes.
And to having it 24/7, it's great to have that. I agree. It's great to spend time with friends and their children. I really enjoy that too. But it doesn't mean that you want to, have that responsibility 24/7 for the next 20
Exactly.
years necessarily. And
Yeah.
of course, we've all got those mothering, nurturing, caring qualities. I mean, most women do, to a degree, whether they're sort of expressing that towards a child or not. we utilize those skills differently. So there are so many ways that we can mother and nurture. And so how would you say you use those qualities in your own life?
Well, one thing that I did get from my mother is her creative capacity. And obviously,
Yeah.
as a woman who birthed 8 children, she's got a great creative capacity.
Yeah.
So for myself, I just really love. So let me just give you a little bit of background here. So when I started my menstrual cycle, and as a young woman, I think we're all working out what is this thing, the menstrual cycle. And for me, it was a really, I didn't really know anything about my cycle.
Yeah.
So in my 20s, I really educated myself about my cycle. It took me a long time to, really come to love my menstrual cycle, and then it was from loving my menstrual cycle and understanding that it is a creative act. It's a creative act and women have every month the creative capacity for conception and birthing.
Yes.
Yeah. So I really began to, when I noticed I worked with the cycle, I noticed that my capacity for creativity expanded. So I don't know, it just kind of opened up the floodgate. So I channeled it into being really, really creative and having a really, like, being curious in the world and finding out a lot about the world and wanting to create, and whatever that creativity meant for me. And I like gardening, and I like cooking, and I love thinking about ideas and how they work together.
Yeah.
So I have a capacity to create in that way, and create life. How a beautiful life, which I think is one of the most beautifully creative acts one can do.
Absolutely. And I was just thinking about how you work with the goddess asteroids as well, and all of their different feminine, powerful qualities.
Well, yeah, because in traditional astrology, we have the moon and Venus, the two female identities, and they're what I call the moon-Venus binary, that women are either are put into this box of being mate and then mother.
Yes.
And, for women who want to live a life outside of mate and mother, they really have to look into finding a life that is theirs, that is uniquely theirs. And they have to, in a way, go on adventures, inner adventures and outer adventures to find that. The asteroid goddesses, and, in most astrology, are not included because they tell a much more complex story about who it is to be a woman, what it is to be a woman, and how you express that as a woman.
Yes. Yeah. And that, of course, is unique to every individual.
Absolutely. And that's the beauty of looking at a chart, because one can see what's playing out here. Now, a traditional astrologer might look at my chart and because of certain things and say, yeah, you're definitely going to have children. And they actually said that to me. But once you put the asteroid goddesses in, you see something else going on.
Yes.
So it's a fuller story.
So it's fascinating, isn't it, how, like, working with those, it really does add like another layer to the story.
And it's layers of autonomy. It's layers of, finding their own path of relationship outside of that romantic relationship that Venus speaks to.
Yeah.
It's about having your own financial autonomy, which, again, Moon, Venus don't really speak to that. It's, very traditional gender roles. It's about having your own, being your own activist with Pallas Athena. Ceres is the great mother, but she's the great mother who's, she's the great Mother Earth. So how do we care for Mother Earth, which I think that's a great way for women to express their mothering currently with, what do we need to do for Mother Earth? How can we take care of her right now?
Yeah, and actually, some women do say that they choose very consciously not to have children due to environmental reasons. And I know a few people who are very, feel very strongly about that, and they're very clear that they don't want to add and contribute to an overloaded planet, an overpopulated planet, as how they see it.
Well, yeah, and this is going to be a big issue moving forward, because the planet doesn't have the capacity to sustain or feed all of us.
Yeah,
as
and
it
we
is.
are using up the resources on the planet twice as quickly as we're replacing them. That's a harsh
Exactly.
reality.
Yeah. So, if this is a mothering act right now. How do we mother the earth for sustainability
Yeah, so
and for
true.
life? Yeah, people can be giving birth to children, but what about the environment they're being raised in? That to me is I'm not saying it's not a bigger mothering goal, but it's a different mothering approach.
Well, if we don't mother the planet at the moment, there isn't going to be a lot left for those future generations. This is the concern of the moment. And this is the work of, people like Tree Sisters who
Yes.
are looking at the reforestation, particularly in those areas around the world who are most in need.
Going back to the point about mother, caring for Earth, Earth will survive, but we as human beings won't. We're the ones who are not going to survive.
Yeah, yeah.
Earth will be fine. But as Tree Sisters and reforesting, these are all the things that need to happen for us as human beings to survive. For the future generations who will be birthed, what are we birthing them into?
It's no wonder there's this increase in so many sensitivities and allergies and strange illnesses and all sorts of weird symptoms that people are producing, but they don't seem to really make that connection.
And what's going into the waters?
Yeah.
And the seas being overfished, it's just not sustainable. So people can argue about how there's no such thing as climate change, whatever. The seas, the temperatures are increasing. There's evidence that the weather patterns are changing. So we can argue about the reasons, but it's not going to stop the Titanic from sinking. Small changes can be about one's diet, limiting if you're eating meat every night of the week or every day of the week at least, just choose to have some meat-free days, because as we know, how meat is farmed has a huge impact on the planet. There's a whole range of ways that we can all do each day. So it's not taking plastic bags is important, but there's bigger things in that as well, making sure that our rivers don't have lead in them.
These small changes that we're seeing happening, like reduction in plastic bag use, and some places kind of, and shops and stores like banning use of them completely, which is really the only way to go, it seems.
And also, vegetables wrapped in plastic.
Oh, yeah, don't start me on that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I think it's, as individuals, we are all activists, and we can make a choice each day about what sort of planet we want to birth generations into.
Absolutely.
And I think that's really powerful. Whether we're making the choice of having children or not, we can actively participate in what am I doing on a daily basis to create a sustainable environment for the birthing future babies into.
Absolutely. And, one of the things that I was just contemplating when you were talking is that one of your, taglines is about finding a life that's yours. And so to somebody who's listening and is also contemplating, making that choice to actively not have children for some of the reasons that we've discussed, how would you advise that they help themselves to find a life that's theirs? What are some of the tools and, wisdom that you could share with them if they're really wondering and pondering like their next steps?
I think one of the best things a woman can do is to work with her menstrual cycle.
Yeah.
It's such a rich phase. It's such a rich process, and it has so much wisdom. Now, I can go really to town on the menstrual cycle, but, I used to put my menstrual blood on my third eye. I used to put my menstrual blood on my second chakra, my fourth chakra, and my third eye.
Yeah.
And I would sleep when I was sleeping, and all sorts of information would come through, and intuitions and whatever else. And that really helped me to trust the process of change and transformation, because, every month that's what women are working with, the process of change and transformation and shedding.
Even if you no longer bleed, but you're still going through a change of types, aren't you? Because we are cyclical creatures. And so then if you're not experiencing that, you could always then look to the lunar cycle as a guide. And those 8 stages.
Yeah, look at the phase of the moon you were born under. There's all this information contained within our psyche about how we can find a life that is ours to live.
Yeah.
And often it involves breaking rules, and it might involve picking off people. But you know what? It's your life. This is it.
Yeah.
I believe in past lives or future lives, but this is it. It's up to us to take the risk to find the life that is ours to live.
Absolutely. And so that's great. Thank you so much for sharing all of that today, Yamini. And can you share the best URL for people to find you and find out more about your work, and if they want to discover their goddess superpowers with you at Globalwoman?
Sure. And I do want to say something about that. I've never regretted not having children.
Yeah. There you go.
Never regret. It was so clear.
Yeah.
I'd never have any regrets about it. And people say to me, who's going to look after you when you're old? Like, I don't know. But I don't know who's going to look after you either. So,
well, exactly. But that's just another one of those myths that people assume that, you're going to be living very close to your children and they're going to be looking after you. And we're all global citizens these days. I mean, I've just spent 20 years in Australia on the other side of the world from my family. And so many of my friends are like avid travelers. So even if you have a great relationship with your family, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to be living on their doorstep, or vice versa.
Exactly. So I have no regrets is what I wanted to say before I finish. And the best URL is globalwoman.com. And that's where you can find more information about how you can find a life that is yours, and about the Goddess Superpower Program and the Global Woman Entrepreneur, which is the woman who's exploring, evolving and embodying a new business world.
Wonderful. And we certainly need more of that.
We do. And that's another way we can be creative and birth. That's right.
Yes, absolutely. And of course, our businesses are an extension of ourselves anyway, aren't they? So it is another way of using that creative output.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. And and anyone who has questions or whatever, just email me via my site. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to Unclassified Woman. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe. For information on events and services, connect with Michelle at michellemariemcgrath.com.